Welcome to Accelerate Her London, and the panel is Tech for Humanity. I'm here with Rachel Beer and Tessa Clark. So my name is Karima Catherine Gundiam. I am the founder and CEO of Red Dot Digital and B2B Match, and I'm the moderator for today's panel. So I'd love to, I'm very interested to hear about both your backgrounds and how you came to be where you are today. I'd love to hear what your job title is, but your name, your journey. Please also tell us what your business does and in what sense it's connected to tech for humanity. So we can start with Rachel.
Sure, yeah. Hi, my name is Rachel Beer. I'm a business development manager, director for Capita. So Capita is a large corporate organisation based in the UK, but we do work globally. And the part of Capita that I work in is our local public service division. So we're all about how we can help local authorities in the United Kingdom deliver better outcomes for their citizens. And it's a really exciting place to be. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But in terms of my journey, I started work a long time ago. And I started work in a customer service role. So I've kind of gone a bit back to front, but I think that's really helped me because I've always understood that the service, the aftercare that we deliver to our clients and our citizens now is really, really important, because my reason for doing the job is about building trust and being authentic with customers. And unless the service that we deliver to them is absolutely as they would expect it to be, then I'm not going to be able to have that kind of trust-based relationship with them. So from there, I've really worked in sales for over 25 years, and that's what I do now, but more around, as I said, helping our customers deliver better outcomes for the citizens of the United Kingdom. And just a little bit about me personally, I've got 3 children, 2 older children, both in their 20s, and a younger daughter who's gone back to school today. Yay. And a dog and a husband. The dog's right up there, I have to say. My 2 older children have both done really well, both got good jobs. My daughter's in the police in London, and my son works for a sports data integrity company. And I think, hopefully as we go through this conversation, technology has enabled me to have a really fulfilling career and a fulfilling family life. And I think when we talk a little bit later about, women in the workplace, I think technology enables you to do both things.
Oh, that's really great. I love a lot of, like, there was a few key point there where I was like, yes, I get it. And I think I'm going to speak for all parents around the world that, going to be happy that kids are back at school. So over to you now, Tessa. I'd love to hear about a little bit your background, your journey, and how did you arrive to what you're doing today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Tessa. I'm co-founder and CEO of Olio. So Olio is an app that exists to tackle the enormous problem of waste in our homes and in our local communities. And we do that by connecting people with their neighbours so you can give away rather than throw away your spare food and other household items. And we also have a B2B offering. So we have 30,000 trained volunteers, food waste heroes we call them, who collect and redistribute unsold food at the end of the day from businesses such as supermarket chains, corporate catering, events, etc. And they collect that unsold food, they take it home, they add it to the app, and they redistribute it to the local community. And that service enables those businesses to have zero food waste locations. So we absolutely are a business that sort of marries that profit with purpose, philosophy, and we really exist to harness the power of technology to solve the climate crisis at scale. And how I ended up here, well, it probably sort of comes full circle to my childhood. So my parents are farmers up in the northeast of the UK. And when you grow up on a farm, one, you learn sort of how much hard work there is that goes into producing food. And two, as a result of that, you have an absolute pathological hatred of food waste. I then went on to pursue what could be described as a fairly classic corporate career, working in a variety of industries, but sort of my whole life changed through a seemingly inconsequential moment about 6 years ago when I had that sort of metaphorical light bulb moment that they talk about, that sort of moment when you come across a problem that you just have to dedicate the rest of your life to solving. And that's when I was moving country and the removal men said I had to throw all of our food away. And clearly, given my background, I was not prepared to do that. So I set out into the streets, clutching this food with my newborn and toddler at the time, hoping to find someone to give this food to. Failed miserably. I thought, why isn't there an app for that? And today there is. And we're an app that's now a global movement of over 5 million people.
Wow.
That's amazing, and congratulations! I've seen this morning that you just raised.
We did.
So
Hurrah. Yes.
that's amazing.
Big news today. Yeah.
It must be very exciting on your end, and we will probably even talk about it as part of
Yeah.
some of the challenges of funding when you're a woman in tech. So thank you so much for this background. So Rachel, how have you found tech has evolved to tackle critical problems? And it's very interesting because you're in the public service arena. So I'd love to hear about how have any new problems and also have any new problems arose as a result of new tech, and I'm thinking change management and adoption and all this.
Yeah. So I've always been fascinated with how technology can change the way that people live their lives, do business. But I think the biggest change that I've seen recently, since I've joined Capita, so over the last sort of 4 years, is the fact that technology has been developed and introduced to customers really with the prime focus of either saving money or making money for that organisation. And I feel very strongly that over the last few years, that has definitely changed. And we at Capita are very proud of the fact that we are here for societal value. To deliver, I mean, that's a bit of a buzzword phrase, isn't it? But to deliver value back to society, I think you said, Tessa, not a relentless focus on profit. It's a focus on how can we help our customers who happen to be the citizens of the UK, but could be a private sector customer. How can we help them create better outcomes for the people that they serve? So for me, that's been the biggest transformation. And I think COVID has just massively accelerated that. So yeah, that's been the change that I've seen. I don't know if you two would agree with that as we go through the conversation. And then in terms of the challenges, Karima, that you said, I think by using technology to help the citizens, then we have to, this fabulous data lake that a few years ago I was talking about and many colleagues were talking about, I think we've all lost our fishing rods. We've just got this massive data lake that everybody can't get anything out of. So I think in order to make things really meaningful and use data effectively, we've got to really focus on how we can simplify that data, streamline the information that we hold on customers, and then make it meaningful and accessible, and give confidence as well to our local authority customers, because I think they're, so huge. And I think big data was such a difficult label. It made it even bigger and more scary. So I think it's boiling it down and making it easy and making it meaningful. But in terms of the challenges, the ethical challenges that come from that and harmonizing people's data and using people's data, I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we see. And we're constantly thinking about how we can overcome those ethical challenges. So just to give you a quick example, who recently, through COVID, developed a simple, very simple tool, and I think technology has to be simple for it to be effective, where we could use proximity readers to help with social distancing. But what we quickly realised was that although it was a great, fabulous idea and would have lots of benefits, we couldn't use that information at an individual level because that would be breaching privacy. Yeah. So what we had to do was use that information to nudge groups of people that weren't individuals to change their behaviour. So we did overcome the ethical and the data integrity issues, but yeah, I just think that comes up all the time.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting point that we often overlook. And I want to go into legalities here, but that's a really, really good point. So thank you for bringing it up. Tessa, I want to ask you about, and you alluded to it at during your introduction, but can you take us through the process it took you to launch Olio, knowing that it's a platform, so the B2C platform, and you mentioned the B2B, but I'd love to hear about the journey.
It involved a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. So I shared with you the sort of ideation moment, really, when I just thought, why isn't there a better solution than this? I'm going to such crazy lengths to avoid throwing away food. And I'd worked in the digital space at that time for about 10 years. So I knew there was an app for everything. And I just couldn't quite believe there wasn't a simple app where I could just advertise my food to a neighbor, they could request it and pop around and pick it up. So the first thing my co-founder Sasha and I did was to research the problem of food waste to see if it was a problem sort of bigger than just my own personal experience or not. And what we discovered absolutely blew our mind. So very briefly, we uncovered the fact that globally a third of all the food we produce each year gets thrown away, which is worth $1 trillion. Alongside that, we have 800 million people who go to bed hungry every night, and they could be fed on less than a quarter of the food we waste in the Western world. And then the real kicker was the fact that food waste is so environmentally devastating. So if it were to be a country, it'd be the third largest source of greenhouse gas emissions after the USA and China. And then we discovered that half of all food waste in a country like the UK takes place in the home. So having gone through that very, very sort of disturbing voyage of discovery, we were immediately committed to solving the problem. So there's a big tick in the box as to kind of, is this a big problem or not? The next thing we did was to do some market research to figure out if anyone even cared about this problem, because there are plenty of big problems on paper that no one actually cares enough about to get them fixed. Mm-hmm. So we did a market research survey. We had a statistically representative response, and the key insight coming out of that was that 1 in 3 people told us that they were physically pained throwing away good food. And we used deliberately extreme language like physically pained to sort of filter out the sort of false positives, people saying, yeah, food waste is bad, because I think most people would agree with that. So it's like, wow, 1 in 3 people are physically pained, and yet there's been no innovation since the bin. Great. The next question, though, was, will people take the next step in our hypothesis, which is to share food with a stranger? And how can we test that without actually having to build an app? And so what we did was we created a WhatsApp group. We invited 12 people who'd done that market research survey, who said that they hated food waste, lived close to each other but didn't know each other. And we said, will you take part in this crazy experiment for 2 weeks? Here's a group of people who live near you, and if you've got any spare food, give it a go through this WhatsApp group. So we waited with sort of bated breath to see if anyone would share or not. And it took about 36 or 48 hours. And then the first item was shared into that WhatsApp group. And then over the next 2 weeks, we had quite a lot of sharing. And Sasha and I then debriefed with all of those participants. And at the end, they said, you absolutely have to build this. It only needs to be slightly better than a WhatsApp group. And they said, and how can we help? And that sort of how can we help was really the genesis of our ambassador programs. We've now got 50,000 ambassadors who are helping Olio to grow all over the world. And our very first of 12 ambassadors, we were building, as you've touched on, a marketplace, and a two-sided marketplace. We've got to grow sort of supply and demand and in lockstep with one another. And so we spent sort of 2 months prior to launching the app, signing up people to find out when the app would be available, all in sort of 5 postcodes in North London. And meanwhile, we'd got our sort of ambassadors ready on launch day to unload their cupboard sort of onto the Olio app. And that was how, on the very first day, we had supply and demand in the marketplace. And then we've just sort of grown steadily from there.
That is really interesting. And for somebody who has launched a platform, I concur, and I'm very admirative of what you've done. So, Rachel, what are some of the specific opportunities and challenges working with the public services? They have to be its own set of challenges that I'd love to hear about, and I'm pretty sure it will interest the audience as well.
Yeah. One of my favourite experiences when I first started working in public sector was being at a meeting with one of my clients, where we got to the AOB section, where I always ask if there are any areas of capital. We're very broad organisation, so there's always something that we can, there are a lot of parallels between us and local authorities in terms of the breadth of our services. So I asked, you know, was there anything else that we could help with to help them serve their citizens in that region better? And one of the people in the meeting, lady, said, yeah, you could help us to stop people falling over. And quite a few people in the meeting laughed at that, and she said, no, I am deadly serious. If you could talk to us about technology that could stop people falling over, that adult social care is the biggest expenditure in the UK, and it's I think last year, £23.3 billion on adult social care. And so you'll know that absolutely technology can help stop people falling over, and we, as well as many other organisations, we can help again with data by identifying vulnerable citizens, which everybody's had to do through COVID, so that's really accelerated it. But we can help identify those people. We can put in place lots of different algorithms to then give them some means of communicating back to the right services to help them if they do fall over. There's lots and lots of technology that can help, but also simple things like just check in with sensors whether a kettle has been used at the same time that it would expect to be used. So those are some of the things that we're working hard on, using Internet of Things, using very simple, very cost-effective things like sensors, and enabling us to not necessarily stop people falling over, but definitely to predict those people who might, and then also be ready to deal with those problems as quickly as possible. And I think we've taken that further now in terms of working more closely with communities, where we've seen through COVID, and I'm sorry I keep going back to COVID because we're moving in the right direction.
It's kind of a staple, you know, it's been 18 months of our lives. So
yeah.
I've
just come back from holiday, and the amount, we took the plunge and went abroad, and the amount of forms, and anyway, so it's definitely uppermost in my mind still. But what we've learned through COVID is that community organisations have been the ones who have actually delivered the best value, quickest, most personalised services to those citizens who've needed them most. So we've just released a report with an organisation called Demos, where we're looking at how organisations like Capita and the resources that we can marshal really quickly could work collaboratively with those local communities to enhance the services even further. So, for example, you know, if a bin man notices or a postman notices that the bins haven't been emptied or the letterbox is full, how could we enable them to use that knowledge to again look out for the people, the vulnerable citizens? So those are just a couple of examples. Other examples in a similar vein are how can we help, but the big conversation around the green decarbonisation, all of that. How can we help by using technology? How can we help reassure people that it's safe to use public transport? How can we help create that modal shift away from cars and into, you know, using public transport? Because we know that anxiety is one of the key things that stops people from doing that. So again, simply using technology with the addition of some contact centre people can tell people that women perhaps travelling, that it's safe to travel at a certain time because there are lots of people around at that particular bus stop, or that the carriages in a train are clean, or even that you know, the weather's nice and we can book a Boris bike for you when you get off your train journey, and you can use that transport. So those are just a few examples, but I think that being a much more human face of a corporate organisation that delivers services, that's going to be the key, and working in partnership with those local communities will, I think, make a huge step change.
Yeah, I love what you said. I'm going to come back to you because you said something, but I want to go to Tessa and talk about your user in the market. More specifically, how, so you mentioned the ambassador program, but how have you connected with your market, especially with that reach, the global reach, and how have you managed that growth?
In multiple stages, really, I think it's sort of fair to say. So when we first launched Olio, it was available just in 5 postcodes in North London. Then we expanded to sort of to London, then to UK, and then we made the app available to be used all over the world. And we did actually do that journey fairly quickly. We did all of that within our first 12 to 18 months. And that was precisely because we had, by that point, developed our ambassador program, because we had people reaching out to us from all over the UK and all over the world saying, I want to be able to use Olio. And we quickly recognized that myself and Sasha couldn't travel to all these places and get us going there. So we thought, why don't we use technology to empower everyday people in their communities to spread the word about Olio on our behalf? And whilst we had some sort of concerns about, I guess, sort of releasing our brand out into the wild, and would people interpret the Olio brand and represent it in the way that we wanted, we felt that that sort of small risk was far outweighed by the enormous benefit, which is the incredible creativity and passion and energy and enthusiasm that we could kind of unleash in our community. And so that's how we've got to where we are today, where 20% of all the activity and all the sharing that's taking place on the Olio app is taking place outside of the UK, in markets as disparate as, you know, Mexico or Colombia, down in Latin America, across to Singapore, Sweden, etc. So that sort of community based model of growth has been really powerful for us. Social media has been incredibly powerful for us, as has PR. And then in terms of paid activity, like many other virtually all other sort of consumer facing startups, it's been Facebook and Instagram have been kind of the most cost effective paid routes to market. And then the other major kind of growth lever that we've had has been our Food Waste Heroes program. So that's the B2B proposition I was talking to you about. So last year, we scaled with Tesco across their 2,700 store portfolio. And so what that meant is that as we signed up a new Tesco store onto our back-end systems, we recruited the volunteers for that store, and then they started collecting the food from the store and then sharing it back out into the local community via the app. That was then like a little fire starter in that local community, because for us, sort of supply is king. It comes first, and then whenever there's free food, demand will follow. And so scaling with our business partners has also been a really, really powerful way for us to grow. And we find that lots of people will start off picking up perhaps some food that they might have collected that shortly, a few hours before, was being sold in a retail store. So they start off their earlier experience that way, but very quickly they then want to go on to reciprocate and perhaps be decluttering their home or moving house, and they then want to use Olio to give back to the community themselves.
Super interesting, really. So we're going to move into another area. I mean, this is London Tech Week, and it's going to, and I'd love to talk to you about women in tech, obviously. So can you both, and you can start, whoever wants to start, but would you be able to provide examples of challenges you faced specifically because you were a woman in tech and how you solved it? You know,
I'm
who
happy
would
to
like to
I'm
I'll
start?
happy
let
to
you,
dive,
let you
dive
go
into that
first.
one.
Tessa.
I'm going to say that I haven't experienced any challenges as a woman in tech when it comes to building and growing a tech business, with the exception of one area, and that's fundraising. So obviously you mentioned earlier on today, we've just announced a $43 million Series B, which is transformational for us. But the experience being a female founder fundraising is nothing short of brutal and soul destroying, if I'm being really honest. And the stats speak to that as well. So only 1% of all venture capital funding goes to female founded businesses, 89% to male founded businesses, and the delta goes to mixed teams. So before you've kind of even gone out into the market, emotionally and psychologically kind of going up against those odds is extremely daunting and intimidating. And then when you go through the fundraising experience itself, you do notice in particular that as a female founder, your vision and ambition isn't perhaps taken quite as seriously, I think, as it would be. If you're a male founder, I don't think often female founders are given the same license to think big. And I also found, if anyone hasn't watched it, I highly recommend watching it. It's a video by Dana Kanzi from Harvard University, and she did a lot of research into this topic. And she found that female founders are asked what's referred to as prevention questions, which is all about the downside and the negativity and how you're going to address that, whereas male founders are asked promotion questions. And that is 100% the case. So I can remember kind of either being in pitch meetings or receiving an email. I can remember just one particular email. I was like, wow, prevention question, prevention question, prevention question, prevention question. And the key thing that Dana said was when you're confronted with those prevention questions, the way to address that is to flip it on its head and answer with a promotion answer. And there have been occasions where I have been with some wonderful investors where I have been asked lots of promotion questions, and I come out of those meetings buzzing, and I love fundraising. And then I think, oh, this is what it must be like for the guys the whole time. So I feel sort of slightly envious, but it is very, very challenging out there, and it's sort of infuriating and depressing in equal measures. But we have managed to do it at Olio. We've raised 5 times now, so it is possible to overcome that gender handicap, but you do have to, I think, really over index on perhaps if you've got any particular pedigree or credibility, lead with those logos up front to make sure that the investors are taking you seriously. Make sure that you have kind of the data and the analytics to try and counter that bias that will be held towards the fact that you're probably not that commercial. So I think if you go in with your eyes wide open and you know the biases that exist against you and you work really hard to counter them, then it is possible to overcome it.
This is emotional in a way for me because I literally can say I've lived what you lived in different scales 100%. Everything you say resonates so much. So thank you for bringing that up. What about you, Rachel? Do you have any examples or stories about challenges you faced as a woman in tech?
I think I've not had any significant issues. I've not I'm in awe of you two ladies. I did listen to your podcast, Karima, so I know that you've done similar thing, and I looked you up as well, Tessa. So I've not had to do anything like that. So I suppose the only thing that I think could help women in the future is around when you do have children and you come back to work. And I think that was the hardest, most emotional, soul destroying time that I have had. And I just every organisation's different, but I think I think going forward, if organisations were a little bit more thoughtful, kinder for women going back to work, I think that would help a lot. I mean, that's probably the only time when I came back to work, and it's almost like, right, okay, if you really think that you can come back after you've had a baby, we're going to put you right in the lion's den, and we're going to, like the Colosseum, and we're going to challenge you like we've never challenged you before, even though it's your second day back. So that's probably the main area. But I think it's also about you yourself, and if I could tell my younger self some things now, it would be, don't just because somebody's banging the table, inevitably it's a man and they're shouting because they want a pay rise, and that's the way they're going to get it. And I'm sitting there thinking, and everyone's looking at me saying, come on, when are you going to start shouting? When are you going to start banging the table? I haven't, and I didn't, but I wished I'd have, instead of feeling like I just wanted the ground to open and swallow me up, and I wish I'd have had the conviction to just sit there comfortably and proudly and think, I know what I'm worth. You will know what I'm worth. And I'm happy with that, because I have been able to achieve the same results by being myself. But I don't think I've ever been, until more recently, that comfortable being myself. I've always wanted to, should I be doing a bit of this, and should I be saying, well, so that would be my advice to my younger self, and maybe other younger women coming through.
That's actually, and I'm going to stay with you. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Tessa, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of add something that I feel kind of really passionately about, is that I think whenever we're talking about women in tech, we should actually also expand it out to talk about the broader issue of diversity in tech. Because I am painfully aware that, founders of color, founders from different socioeconomic backgrounds, all can come up against really, really challenging barriers when it comes to either fundraising or just kind of building careers in tech. And I get very, very frustrated because I believe that we are sort of shortchanging humanity as a result of the lack of diversity in tech, because we are building products that are not designed or built for everybody, and we're also overlooking some of the biggest problems facing humanity today. And when I look at the types of founders that are in the space that I'm in, which is kind of climate tech, let's say, we're all trying to solve the climate crisis, I see such wonderful diversity of founders there. And as a result of the underfunding that goes to diverse founders, we are therefore underfunding the solving of the biggest problems facing humanity today. And so that is why sort of the lack of diversity is a really, really big problem for all of us, and something I feel really passionate about. And the flip side of that is the more and more diverse founders, the more and more female founders do start unlocking funding and start building and scaling their businesses, they almost always, without exception, build more diverse teams around them. And that, I think, is how we start solving this problem.
And you guys went into the questions I was gonna ask you as well, because it was very clear to me when I prepared for this panel, that we were gonna tackle women and diversity, inclusion as well. That's another thing, right? And I wanted, and because you actually already spoke about this, I'd love for you to give me 3 concrete ways you feel we can support women in tech today. And you kind of touched on that, but I'd like to wrap it up in a nice, easy package to give to listeners. So who would like to start? Maybe Tessa, would you?
Maybe we can crowdsource the three between us. Three each is pretty hardcore. Something I think is super important is role modeling. And so I'm an obsessive podcast listener, for example, and it drives me bonkers that all I hear all day long is male voices. So I think, so anyone who is creating or curating or producing content has an enormous responsibility and opportunity there to showcase diverse voices. I really think kind of you can't be what you can't see. And so that I think is really important. The other thing, I do believe in sort of setting quotas, for example, around your shortlists from, you've got a recruitment consultant, they're out there looking for candidates. At Olio, we're really, really firm on our recruitment consultants about the diversity that we want coming back to us in shortlisted candidates. Now, the recruitment consultants don't always like that because it's harder work for them. It's harder to go out and find a female React Native developer. But it's very clear that if you kind of want to win and retain our business, then that's what you've got to do.
That's a really good point.
That's two out of three.
But it's very strong ones, I have to say, and I high five you for this. What about you, Rachel? You already touched on
I completely agree with you, Tessa, on role models. And I'm an avid so I try my hardest to either go for a run before work or go for a walk at lunchtime if I don't manage a run. And I listen to podcasts. And I think, find female role models or diverse role models that give you a different perspective. So I'm an avid listener of a lady called Tiffany Bover. She works in Salesforce, and she does podcasts every couple of weeks with successful people from all walks of life. But there are so many women there as you say, I think that is one of the best things that you can possibly do. And so that would be number one. Second one is what I've already said. Don't change yourself. Trust your instincts, because if you work hard and you're doing okay, you are right. You believe that you are right. Don't try to be something that you're not. Just stick with go with your gut, go with your instinct. And then from a podcast, a lady called Kim Scott, she talks about, I'll get the name right here, radical challenges. So feedback, I think, is a really important one. Don't be afraid to radically challenge, but in a kind way. And I think asking for feedback and giving feedback, I think women tend to be able to do it in a kind way anyway, but don't be over kind, be direct, be challenging, but do give and seek feedback, because it will, you will learn, other people will learn. And I think sometimes I certainly have been reluctant to do that. And when I look back, I wish I had. And I'm just going to touch on one subject that I am really giving a lot of feedback around. And you mentioned it actually, Karima, in this podcast, and it's mansplaining, which I absolutely, my husband is an absolute legend at mansplaining. So I am trying really hard to kindly point out when people are, and it's not just mansplaining, is it? It's just explaining something that you haven't asked to be explained. And there's a really lovely flow chart that a lady put together for her male colleagues, because they just did not know they were doing it. And they said, can you help us to understand when we are mansplaining? So, back to the feedback thing. If we don't tell people they're doing it, then they're not gonna
That's
stop.
brilliant.
So those are my three things.
That's really
I've got
brilliant.
a third one as well, which is to start early on. So for anyone in the audience who is sort of thinking, oh, well, I'll get to that sort of diversity piece, but I've got more urgent business objectives right now. I think it's absolutely critical to start your diversity journey right at the beginning and lay it in the foundations of your organization, because the reality is no one wants to join your company as a token anything.
Yeah.
So the sooner you start, the easier it will be. The later you leave it, the more difficult it will be.
That's so important. I always say that has to be part of your DNA, but you also, your messages have to be congruent with who you are, because people will be attracted to your organization if they feel like, it's authentic again. So there's one thing actually, it's like, and I wasn't counting on asking you this, but it leads really well to how do you feel about intentional advocacy? So this is really, we know that gender diversity is something that is taken care of in a way. It doesn't mean we're there, but at least it's taken care of. But the other diversities, specifically ethnic diversities, are not necessarily included. So how do you become that advocate that intentionally support the growth of those founders or your peers? Whoever would like to answer.
I don't think I necessarily sort of have an answer, but I have now, I've done a lot of reading, particularly in light of Black Lives Matter, and talking to people and listening and learning, and I've sort of taken a decision never to talk about gender challenges without also talking about broader diversity challenges. And I think that's just a really good thing to do. There's another type of diversity that I'm also really passionate about that doesn't get talked about nearly enough, which is neurodiversity. Yeah. And Olio is a remote first business. And through our experience of building a business with no office from the ground up over the past kind of 6 years, I have realized that for so long, we have been forcing a whole bunch of people who, let's say, are square pegs into the round hole of commuting into a loud, noisy office and expecting them to be productive. Yeah. And through having being a remote first business, we have been able to attract all this outstanding talent that tell me they are 10 times more productive working for Olio because they can kind of work from home in an environment that suits them. And it's been a real kind of learning lesson for me that actually the office environment has been built absolutely around one type of person. And so I think that kind of neurodiversity piece is a really important one as well.
That's so cool. Like literally, I feel like both of you are we're almost all sisters in a way. And I'm so glad because I'm sitting here in Toronto and you're in the UK, and I can't wait to make that connection and meet you actually. And so one last question. This is London Tech Week, so I'd love to hear you around the strong points of the London, and we can broaden it to the UK tech scene, in particular, as opposed to any other markets you may have experienced in.
Well, I focus on the United Kingdom, so my clients are right across the country. So I do work in London a lot, but I don't see any real difference, to be honest. I mean, Tessa, you may have a different view.
Yeah, I mean, I think the London tech scene is amazing, and it's an absolutely incredible thing to be part of. At Olio, we have benefited enormously through having had the opportunity to join a number of accelerators, industry groups, networks, and the London ecosystem, I think, is an incredibly vibrant one. And what's really helpful about that is that sort of peer learning that it facilitates. So especially as an early stage founder, I definitely prefer if I can find out about the pitfalls from other people rather than having to fall into every single one of them myself. So it has definitely accelerated the growth of our business. So we've been part of the Mayor of London's International Business Programme. We've been part of Tech Nation's Upscale. Facebook had London Lab Incubator, and sort of many more. So they've been really, really amazing programs to be part of. But I do, back to the point that you were making, when it comes to recruitment, actually well over half of our team is outside of London, and there is incredible talent all over the country. And I think that in a post-COVID world, there's even more incredible talent outside of London, and it's really great to be able to tap into that.
This is so inspirational, and it's a great way to start the week as far as I'm concerned. So I just wanted to, share, thank you for sharing your experiences with me, with the audience. Thank you for joining us and for all the insights. And thank you so much for being true advocates on the grounds, right? So thank you both, Rachel and Tessa.
Thank
It's
you.